give the ball for the individual. Don't go on the agenda if you're not ready.
Okay. Okay, at this time I will call to order the July 24, 2024 regular meeting of the Royal Oak Downtown Development Authority. At this time we'll have public comment. Does anybody want to address the board today? Mr. Harrison.
Thank you. Bill Harrison, 2729 Trafford and Royal Oak. Where have you guys been regarding the new apartment building that's proposed for 5th and Lafayette with no parking on site? Only Gail has been speaking out about this development at the ZBA and commission meetings as it affects her property as well as mine on Washington. The ZBA approved 81 parking spaces in the Lafayette structure, which will save the developer at least $2.4 million in construction cost. I'm also concerned that on the July 11th, the ZBA refused to accept a request to reconsider the June 13th 5-4 decision to allow the proposed 11-story apartment building at 5th and Lafayette to have 81 spaces in the Lafayette parking structure, in addition to the 82 spaces previously allocated to Baker College. At the ZBA meeting, the chairman, at the subsequent DDA, try again, I'm having a Biden moment here. At the ZBA meeting, the subsequent one, the chairman stated that he could not accept a request for reconsideration. I have been advised by 2 persons that the ZBA was told not to listen to the request for reconsideration, which is allowed by the city ordinance. The planning department memo included in the June 13th ZBA meeting agenda states, since the previous meeting, the petitioner has not provided any additional material nor has made any modifications to the proposed plans which would alter the variance requests as listed. In fact, however, the developer hired an attorney, the fixer, who provided a significant amount of new information on June 11 in anticipation of the June 13 ZBA meeting. So people didn't show up because we didn't know there was new material. But anyway, notably, the 23-24 parking utilization data for the Lafayette structure was presented by the fixer. Parking data for the current year is not a parking study. Downtown business has been significantly depressed since the March 2020 COVID shutdown and the MPS parking system installed at the end of the shutdown, one more comment, and has turned people away from downtown. The DDA should have commissioned a proper parking study of the Lafayette parking structure that reflects the future demand of the commercial area served by the structure before committing to using the parking structure for residential parking.
Mr. Harrison, I need to finish.
Yeah, I've got it. I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to address the board? Mr. Holbert?
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Hobrecht, and I'm here to talk about my building at 408 South Washington. In the course of the last 30 days, we still have a dirt alley. Anybody wants to come by and see what a dirt alley looks like after a good rain like we had last night? It's mud. It's pure mud. And the greatest difficulty still is that we do not meet ADA. Anybody that needs to leave through the rear exit of Lily's Seafood Grill has to take a 2 6-inch steps down. So if you happen to be in a wheelchair or in a scooter, you're not going to make it. I don't know why we can't get this repaired, but I'd like to see if you could think about it maybe in the next 30 days. Let me say one quick thing also about last month's meeting to raise parking rates. Mr. Harrison is completely correct in saying that it is soft. It's very, very soft. We heard about Jolly Pumpkin closing their restaurant on Main Street 2 weeks ago. Imaginate the restaurant behind us closed a couple of months ago. I know another restaurant that's going to close right after Christmas. Okay, things are not strong. And if we recall, maybe like 6, 8 months ago, before Mr. Brake was fired, he gave us the economic lesson of elasticity, right? The more expensive something is, the less you buy of it. And if you think that we're going to be able to go to $5 minimums to go into a deck, I can kiss my bookstore tenant goodbye, because no one's going to pay $5 to go and buy a $5 book or a $1 book. This is the wrong time to raise rates. We have a significant parking problem, and I hope that we do something smarter than just raise rates. That might be the easy fix for the city commission, but it's not our problem. Okay? We didn't create this thing. And I know Mr. DeBook, maybe you have nothing to say about this, but Mr. Fournier, Ms. Douglas, and Ms. Perush, well, she's dead. What were you thinking? Okay? Now we're involved in a lawsuit to try to recover revenues. And just for your information, I parked right out front. Do you know what it costs out front? It's free. Okay? I don't know why you have to make my customers and their tenants, my tenants and their customers pay. It's a great system that we have. I wrote a letter to Mr. Twing about 4 years ago, right during the middle of the pandemic. I said, we can't be charging $5 to go into a deck. We should be thankful if anybody shows up. So now we have the 2 hours free. We're competitive with Birmingham, but we've got to maintain our competitive position. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Anybody else want to address the board today? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Back to the regular agenda, approval of the minutes for June 26, 2024. Any questions for staff regarding this? No? What's the desire of the board, please? Motion by Director Leclave,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Wallenberg Weber. No discussion. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we are on to business. 5A, Plant Moran presentation. Mr. Twing, you want to start us with this?
Did you want to just look at the monthly expenses first, or are you good with those?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that item. I'm sorry. My apologies. There is a list of monthly expenses. Is there any discussion on these or questions for staff regarding this item? Seeing none, we will move on to 5A. Mr. Twing?
Certainly. Brian and Carolyn are here from Plant Moran to give you an overview and presentation on their analysis of the city parking system and its funding. You'll recall that they were hired to do that for you, and this is their first opportunity to come back and give you that what they found.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's very nice to be here. This is my first time in this lovely building. It is fantastic. As Tim mentioned, Carolyn Lorenz, Brian Candler, Mike Moran. You have a hard copy of some slides that we put together along with some questions and observations. The questions aren't necessarily answerable, but it's for discussion purposes. What we did, and I did want to say thank you to the city and Tony, very, very helpful and cooperative through the whole process. All the information that we asked for, we received, and received it very promptly. So thank you very much for that. So we analyzed the 2018 agreement. As you know, that agreement holds the DDA partially responsible for paying off the debt service on the 2018 bonds. We looked at the last several years of audited financial statements and the underlying support for the parking fund, money going in, money going out, the debt obligation that it has, and then put together these slides. And I think it's pretty apparent when you look at what position the parking system was in 2019, and then as soon as the pandemic hits, the decline is quick and deep. And so now you're in a position, as you know, where the system is asking for assistance financially. And so before we go through the details, I can tell you without hesitation or any concern on my part, the system absolutely needs the financial assistance. It does not have the money it needs in order to pay its bills and especially pay the debt service on the 4 separate bond issues. So no question about that. I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn, let her walk you through the slides. They do go in a progression so that you can see from the position, the balance sheet of where the parking system was, and then the operations for the next 5 years and how those operations should be providing money for debt service after it pays the regular accounts payable, and how it's just not there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carolyn.
Good afternoon. So you should have hard copies in front of you of the graphs. I'd like to start on page 3. So this particular slide is a presentation of your balance sheet components for the parking system for the last 5 years. You'll notice here you have unrestricted net position in blue. And if you look to the far right, you have fiscal year 19. Unrestricted net position for 19 was 4.6 million. And if you look to the far right for 2023, it reduced to 1.5 million. So you can see that,
1.5
I'm sorry, negative 1.5. So I wanted to obviously point out that it has been decreasing each and every year, and working capital is the other item to point out here. We started with 3 million to negative 2.5 million. Am I reading 3.5 million? You know what? I need my glasses. Bear with me 1 second. I'm so sorry.
That's terrible getting old.
That's terrible. I'm getting old here. Sorry. So you're just going to have to bear with me. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brent. That's okay. You sure? Come on. Who's taking it? I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. That's embarrassing. Anyway. Okay, so working capital, you can see, went from 3 million in orange on the left-hand side to a negative 3.5 million on the far right. Obviously here, you know, it has changed quite significantly from fiscal year 2019. So in blue, again, you know, that is your unrestricted net position, which is your assets minus your liabilities. It's really the amount that's available for appropriation. And then also in orange, again, just want to point out that is working capital so for those of you that aren't, you know, sure exactly what that means, that's your current assets minus your current liabilities. And that's really the amount that is to be used to finance your day-to-day operations. Thank you for these. This is so much better. Moving on to page 4. So this particular slide shows your operating revenues and expenditures of the parking system. So your revenue that is shown in blue started with 4.7 million to 3.7 million in fiscal year '23. So you can see here revenues have not fully recovered from your pre-pandemic levels, as Brian mentioned. And in addition to that, your expenses have increased. So going from 2.3 million in orange on the far left to 2.7 on the far right in fiscal year '23. So, coupled with, the revenues not fully recovering and expenses increasing, it's just not a great situation right now. Your operating surplus there is really just the difference between the two, and that's what's left to pay your debt service. So basically in fiscal year '19, you have 2.4 million in operating surplus to 1.1 million in fiscal year '23. So again, the story has definitely changed over the last 5 years. Moving on to page 5. So this graph here shows, it takes your operating surplus, which we just looked at, that's available to pay your debt service, and it subtracts out your debt service on your first CIP bonds. These are your old bonds that you were paying off. And then it shows you what's remaining to pay off your 2016 and your 2018 bonds. So again, working from left to right, in fiscal year '19, your operating surplus was 2.4 million, and it went down to less than $1 million in fiscal year '23. So again, it's really just your gray bar minus your orange bar equals your green bar, which is, what is left to pay off the 2016 and 18 bonds. So after paying the debt service on those first 2 bonds, there's really nothing left or next to nothing left to pay the 2016 and the 2018 bonds. Page 6. So this graph here, the green bar shows your operating income after paying those first 2 construction in progress bonds. And really what we're trying to show here is how much is left to cover the 2016 and 2018 debt. So in blue, blue represents what the payments are for the 2016 and 2018 debt. And you can see there really is not enough money to pay all the debt in fiscal year '20 on. So the conclusion here, since 2018 bond debt service started, the system deficit has really ranged from 1.4 million to 2.6 million in deficit there.
That's each year, not cumulative.
Right. Page 7. So this graph here, the red shows your shortfall after all of your debt service payments, and the black shows half of the 2018 debt, which is really less than the total shortfall each and every year. So the conclusion here is half of the 2018 debt service is less than the deficit every year since fiscal year '20, and 4 years of half of the debt service is equal to roughly 2.8 million through fiscal year '23. So again, just looking at the chart, fiscal year '20 in red shows your parking system shortfall of a negative 1.5 million, and it moves over to fiscal year '23 of 2 million. And the last graph here, again, it's just kind of presenting it a little bit differently. In black, it's the sum of half of the 2018 debt service, which again is about 2.8 million. And basically we're saying the city's request for the DDA contribution is 1.5 million. So Brian is gonna just kind of talk through some observations and questions as a result.
So please stay on that on slide 8. So according to the terms of the agreement that the DDA made with the city back in 2018 for those bonds, the DDA could be asked for up to 1/2 of that debt service on that bond. So according to the letter, my interpretation of the contract, not a lawyer, but reading that contract as an accountant, to me it says that $2.7, $2.8 million would have been a reasonable ask from the city, and they've only asked for 1.5. Yes.
I just needed to clarify one thing for me, because it sounds like you're talking about two different things here. Your statement says that we're talking about the debt on the bond, where all these documents reflect the debt on the parking system.
The debt on the deck that is part of the parking system. So the DDA has committed to supporting the most recent 2 of the 4 bonds that the parking system has. You're already contributing half of the 3rd one, and you have not yet contributed toward the 4th, is my understanding. And so the city's deficit elimination plan includes requesting that the DDA contribute, it was $500,000 a year for 2001, 2, and 3, which is, as far as I can tell, again, not a lawyer, but less than what the contract could ultimately hold the DDA to.
So you're saying that this debt accumulation is strictly based on the 4th bond, on the last bond?
Yes. Yeah,
And there's no reflection on any of the 3 bonds prior to that?
correct. Those are all, if you're paying them off sequentially in terms of the oldest get paid first, the newest gets paid last, there isn't any money to pay the last bond.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure. Page 9, please. So due to lack of volume, due to changes in the way that the parking system charges the people that come into the city and want to park, there just is not enough revenue coming into the parking system to pay for its operations and the 4 debt service payments that have to be made every year. It's just not producing enough. And so the bond must be paid. So the city and or the DDA is responsible for making the holders of that bond whole. There are some, I don't want to say peculiarities though, but the system has some different things going on. So parking enforcement is paid to the parking system, paid for, meaning the people that write the tickets, that police things, are being paid for out of the parking fund. But the money that eventually comes back from the court goes to the general fund. So it's not wrong, it's not illegal, but typically you would hope that revenues and expenditures are together. So yes, of course, the parking system, you stay there too long, you didn't pay your way, you get a ticket. You would hope that the money would go from that ticket to the parking system, but that's not the way it's set up. And quite honestly, that's not the way it's set up in most places. So the idea of the court, or from the court's perspective, is they are charged with administering justice, and the general fund pays the city's share of the court's operating costs. And so the general fund is getting the money that's coming from the court activity that they sponsor. So there's certainly, they have a very strong case to be made as to why the general fund should get that ticket money. But the parking fund pays for the enforcement and doesn't get the resulting money at the end. Question, I don't know that it's answerable, but is the $55,000 a month that is being paid to MPS more or less than what MPS lost by expanding free parking from 5 to 15 minutes? I don't have that information. I don't believe the city has that information. I don't know that the question can be answered. but it's worth discussing because that 55,000 is what has been imposed on the system because MPS got a smaller share of the money that was coming from tickets because fewer tickets were being written. Next slide, please.
Yeah, the goal's not tickets, though.
Excuse me?
So the goal is not tickets. It's just frustrating.
Oh, yeah, agree.
I mean, going to 5 minutes is just unacceptable. You get a ticket just looking at your phone and getting on one phone call, and now I get a ticket.
I don't disagree.
I'm just
Yeah.
frustrated with it.
Mr. Twing, in your memo, you seem to indicate that the $55,000 was included in the request, in the amount requested from the city. Is that correct?
No, I believe what I was referencing is I believe it's part of the deficit. It's in the expenditure numbers, so it's already included in there. There was an original letter from the former finance director talking about a request for the DDA to enter into a separate agreement to cover those costs separately. That's never proceeded any further.
I guess I'm not sure what position we're in there, in that, whether in your proposal for the yearly payment was based on an amount of 1.4 million? Is that,
Well, the 705,000, if you were to budget for it every year, is half of the annual debt service on the 2018 bond. It has nothing to do with the $55,000 monthly payment the city makes.
okay, maybe I read your memo wrong?
No,
Is
it's
that-
also, what I said was also my understanding that the $55,000 monthly payment for the additional grace period on street spaces is already included in the deficit figures. It's already included in the numbers that they're showing as a cost to the parking system. So you wouldn't want to enter into an agreement to pay for those separately because it's already in what you're covering.
Okay.
Could you go back to slide 10, please? So these next couple questions, these are unanswerable. They're discussion topics. So, and the gentleman that spoke during public comment stated that, no one wants to pay $5 to go into my store and buy a $1 book. That makes sense. So, but you have a system that can't pay for itself, therefore it needs more revenue. But if you increase the revenue, then fewer people come, and now the system needs even more revenue. So where is that going to come from? It's a circular reference almost. Is it going to hurt downtown? I can't say for sure one way or the other. It certainly seems to be the opinion of most folks that I've heard speak. But going forward, based on the 2018 agreement, it does seem like the DDA should plan on paying that half of the 2018 bond payment like you do with the previous bond payment. Because barring some tremendous change in the volume of people that come downtown and pay to park, or a tremendous change in the cost of running said system, I can't see how the parking system in the city of Royal Oak is going to sustain itself without your contribution.
Can I interrupt one more time? And then we have a question. I think this is probably best for Mr. Twing. Mr. Twing, we're currently paying into the auto system right now an amount of around $585,000
That's correct.
on an annual basis.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a better, for lack of a better term, a time limit on that, or a term on that?
Yes, there is. It's part of the, I believe, the Second Street deck that you're paying on. It's either that one or the South Lafayette. I'd have to go back and look. But the term of that is when the bond ends. I don't have that in front of me, but you've been paying on it for several years, and so when that bond ends, your obligation to pay on it ends.
Okay. Yeah, if you could just really if you could just find out how long, or if there's a projection or a guess.
So, I mean, it's
Is
a
it
fixed
another
payment.
5 years or 10 years, 20 years?
Was it a 20-year bond?
It wasn't a 20-year bond.
Okay, so you're 8 years into it. There'd be another 12 years.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about Director Yesvik.
I was gonna ask about that 500,000 that we pay, and that's the 2016 bond, I believe,
Yes.
the 500 that comes out. You know, there's several questions here. I guess I'll preface it with saying that I don't think there's any question, at least in my opinion, that the DDA would help the parking system if it needs help. I don't see how we don't do that. And according to your information, which, you know, I'd like to have some time to look at these graphs and understand a little bit more the concepts that you're talking about. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think, of course, we help. But I don't think it's responsible to say, yeah, we're just going to help without understanding better how we got from 4.8 million in 2018 to negative 1.4 million in 2023. I think we have to take a serious look at that and understand what the factors are, the circumstances. You can say COVID, but I'm not comfortable with blaming COVID for 100% of it. So there's more to the story, and I think yes, we're gonna help, but we have to understand the reasons why, so we can put ourselves in a position to help remedy this situation and not be responsible for half of the 2018 bond going forward ad infinitum. You know, we have to understand better why these things are happening. You know, I have my first guess. I think everybody at the table has a good guess. You said either a tremendous change in or, you know, reduction in expenses, or a tremendous increase in revenue. You know, there's one other tremendous thing that we can do that I think we're working on right now as a city in court. But that needs to change too. So, in my opinion, I would want to take this back to the committee that we've established to understand more of the reasons, and perhaps you've looked at some of those things over the course of the 5 years to understand why we went from really, really nice to really, really bad situation. And then just, so the technicalities don't matter as much to me. I think there's some other provisions in the contract that speak to different things that are relevant to our obligation. It's not, we don't need to get into those now. But I did want to ask you, in these years, the fund didn't go negative. The way I read it, we're provided some materials for today. The fund really didn't go negative until 22?
I would say 21 when working capital went negative. So your equity is a more complicated calculation, but working capital is current assets like cash and receivables minus current obligations, accrued payroll, accounts payable, et cetera, not your long-term debt. So the fact that from 20 to 21, that's when your working capital flipped, it corresponds with a significant decrease in parking revenue.
So in 21, there was the first time that the fund didn't have enough money to pay this 2018 bond payment.
It didn't have let's see, I don't think it had enough in 20 either. Yeah, it did not have enough in 20.
In 20?
Yeah, if you look at page 6. So in 2019, The green bar is the amount you have available, or I say you, I'm sorry. The amount the parking system had available to pay the 2016 and 18 bonds. The 2016 and 18 bonds were $500,000, and the surplus for that year, it was 1.3. So in 2019, the system generated enough money to pay its debt. 2020, it did not. So you can see how the red bar went negative, the blue bar exceeds the green bar. That's when the first, in 2019, you didn't have a debt payment on 2018 until 2020. So as soon as those 2018 bond payments kicked in, the system couldn't handle it.
So we're not, I assume we're not in default, so in 2019, 20, 21, and 22, how did the payment get paid?
It ran a deficit. So I can't say, I don't know if general fund lent money, but the parking system itself had negative working capital, which means it did not have cash in the bank.
So, I guess.
Mike, if you can, the South Lafayette parking debt service ends in fiscal year 2026. Now, you're not paying on that one anymore. You were years ago, but as part of the 2018 agreement, you got out of paying half of that debt service. But the South Lafayette debt runs through 2026. The 2016 debt service runs through, which is the new Center Street, runs through 2031.
2031.
That's the 585,000 is through 2031.
So is the parking system still paying the Lafayette debt?
The South
Debt
Lafayette,
service?
yes.
Okay, we've got some questions. I saw Mr. Dubuck's hand first. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the most important chart we have in front of us is the revenue versus operating expenses as far as what we need to understand. So we see in 19 at 4.6 million we're generating, and COVID takes a bite out of that. We're on the upswing from a revenue standpoint. Why we haven't fully recovered, if we're to understand our foot traffic study properly, where we do have a ton of bodies still coming, exceeding the number of visitors we had in 19. I think what we understand is that revenue is down because of the $5 flat that we had in 2019 that was nixed in the interim. Our understanding is that was a substantial revenue generator, correct?
That's what we were told by finance department.
Okay, so that makes up for this gap in revenue. If we're to understand our foot traffic study, it's not a drop in the number of unique visits who would likely be paying for parking. So that explains a lot of the revenue side of things. What I'm really trying to understand is the increase in expenses, operating expenses from 19 to 23, going from 2.3 million to, what is this, 2.8 million. Is that additional expense, is that MPS? But they're paid largely from the ticket revenues. So what is driving that rise in operating costs?
When did the 55,000 a month start?
But this is so we're going from 2.3 million to 2.7 million. So that's,
We're adding
that's a
$660,000.
$400,000 increase in operating expenses that I want to understand.
But look at 19 to 20 to 21 to 22, operating expenses were down.
Right.
So I think that 55,000 a month must have kicked in during fiscal year 23.
Yes, but I'm trying to understand 19 to 23. What is causing that $300,000 to $400,000 increase? I mean, the 55 is probably part of it, yeah, but there's an increase in operating expense well beyond that.
I mean, if it's 55 a month, that's over 600,000 a year, and that's greater than the increase in expense.
Okay. Oh, that's right. It's 55 a month. Good God.
Yeah.
They're the worst. So that's what's driving all the other charts. We didn't default. We went into fund balance to pay the debt because the revenue is not exceeding.
Yeah, the city's not going to let a
generating
bond
costs
payment go
beyond
into
that.
default.
And that's not sustainable. So I think the biggest thing we do in addition to settling our issues with MPS, is we've talked about restoring the $5 parking, which should substantially get that revenue back up where we need it. So I'm not sure there's much more to dig in on besides those two numbers, and I think we already have those two answers.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr. DeBuck, and I think the other concern, and one of the other questions that I had were, in one of the memos we have here, there states there's a, I mean, all these documents and all these figures go through 23. Well, we're fastly approaching the end of 24. And I understand that one of these memos tells us that there's a principal payment due in October of 24. And I don't know what effect that's going to have on our deficit also.
I would anticipate that it increases it.
Yeah, I would too, and I would go back to think what one of the things that Mr. DeBuck was trying to say here was, if we continue on with the contract that we have with MPS, I don't see us coming out of that deficit until that contract is completed or over by some means or whatever. Because we can't operate under the current contract of how the money is being distributed for the income coming in. Does that make sense, Mr. Mulleweber?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So we're probably more than likely looking at 2 more years of deficit.
I would think so. I mean, all things being equal, yes.
So I would think from the DDA's point of view, we would anticipate, well, do you have any projection as to?
We did not look forward. We did not do any forecasts. We can if you would like us to.
Okay. And the calculation that you did, Mr. Twain, on the 1.4 million, you anticipate that gets us caught up to speed, or it pays previous deficit off? I guess I'm trying to
Well, the 1.5 million that's being requested from the city came from the finance director previously as part of the deficit elimination plan. That wasn't my figure, that was the request from the former finance director to help with addressing the deficit elimination plan that the city had to put together. And the 1.4 million annually that is paid on the debt service is just the debt service on that deck. And the DDA's obligation on if there's a deficit is to pay half of that, or roughly $705,000. And so my memo was, if you pay or allow the city to, under the agreement, I think technically the city can just withhold the funds. There's no obligation to have a vote today or not have a vote today. The purpose of Plant Moran being here was to outline for you what your potential liability could be under that agreement. And again, I'm not an attorney. If you want an opinion on the agreement, you have Daniel Chris that could write you an opinion that says yes, whatever. But in my reading of it, it's once it's shown that there's that deficit, you're obligated to budget for and put that money aside, and the city's has the right to withhold it and help cover the debt. So I don't know that there's a need for a vote today. If the committee wants to keep discussing it, that's fine. The request is under what you have in fund balance. So there's not a financial issue that you couldn't do it. It doesn't impact your last fiscal year's obligation. I think your fund balance after the audit's done for the fiscal year that just ended, June 30th of 2024, that fund balance will probably grow a little bit because there were several budgeted projects that you didn't accomplish last year. Fifth Street being one of them at 1.5 million budgeted number. There's tree grate numbers at 300,000 we haven't done anything with either. So you're pushing a large number of projects forward. So I don't think the idea that if the city took the 1.5 million is going to be an issue. Obviously, we'd need to do a budget adjustment for this fiscal year to how we want to address this fiscal year. But as far as going through 2023, which is what we're talking about, is the last audited fiscal year, if the city took the money, it's not going to impact anything that you've got or had done, so.
Okay, one more question, and then I'll let this gentleman finish up if you have some more you want to share with us.
I'm all set.
Okay. Tim, then, the difference between the city taking 1.5 million and the 705 that you're talking about on an annual basis? What are we talking about?
Well, the 1.5 million is, as Brian indicated, is your potential deficit going back to when the parking system started to go into deficit. That cumulative total of your potential liability is some close to 2.8 million.
Yes.
So effectively, under the terms of the agreement, and again, neither of us are attorneys, we want an opinion, effectively the city could take 2.8 million. They're only asking for $1.5 million going back to when it started going to deficit.
And then are we
The
expected
700,000 is, I think we should start budgeting for until there's not a deficit.
That's what I was trying to get to. So we're talking about both figures, one being done immediately and one being done on an annual basis.
Correct. Until the revenue changes.
Mr. Oh, I see you on.
Yeah, I just want to say what the Plant Moran's report really indicated, this goes back several years, but that the obligation, as you just mentioned, could have been higher. The 1.5, I think, Tony, I don't want to put you on the spot, that's what we need now as part of our deficit elimination plan that's been filed with the state, whether we have an update and stuff. We were talking about this earlier, but that would be the, putting my city hat on behalf of finance, that would be our ask today. Then what Tim will come back with, and maybe this would be of value to go through the parking committee, is okay, then what do we need to amend the budget for at a later date, maybe our next meeting, maybe a couple of meetings after there's more discussion about that. But I would like to suggest to the board that they consider or put something in place that allows, as Tim said, we could just take it now, but I think it's better for the board to recognize that our ask is less than a potential obligation going back historically, and that we work together in the future on what budget amendment we might have to do later after the parking committee has had a chance to look at this. And there may be, we can't comment on pending litigation other than to say it's pending, and that may result in some things. Don't know at this point.
Director London, did you want to?
I just want to make a comment. On page 4, you had a conclusion that said operating revenue is not fully rebounded from the pandemic, and I think that's an assumption, not a fact. I think most people on this board would say the MPS parking system had a huge impact on the number of people coming to downtown Royal Oak and parking in Royal Oak.
Well, the revenue has not rebounded. Now, there could be multiple reasons as you discussed, but it's just a statement that you're getting less now than you were before the pandemic.
Right. And him bringing up the PACER studies really haven't been fully dived into, nor was that, he didn't go into detail day traffic versus night traffic. There's not a retailer, salon owner, yoga studio who wouldn't say there was a significant decrease in traffic in downtown Royal Oak during the day versus 2019, 2018. So those studies were not detailed when Daniel gave us the broad brushstrokes. Right, this is just a comment, nothing to.
Mr. DeVos.
Yeah, I would say I think again, on the revenue side here, I don't know that it's pandemic. What we do know is that we voluntarily gave up a chunk of revenue
Right.
by giving up the $5 flat rate. We know that maths.
Yeah.
That's where that money went. And that's why we're talking about revisiting that.
Right, and I think, if you don't mind me chiming in here, I think there could be also an impact on the fact, looking at some of our other recommendations that we've talked about here on the board, in terms of the parking system. And I still don't, I'm not clear on the status, but we still have parking lots that are not online. We have many still coin operated. I don't know what kind of financial impact those would have if they were upgraded to the MPS system. But there are other things that we could be doing. And I think we need to take a look at those. And as Mr. Wallenweber said, we can probably just do that back at the committee level.
I think that's an important observation, along with the fact that several of the lots have not been online for the entirety of
the contract
of 2023.
Yeah.
So we'll see what 2024 revenues show. As my last question, I think maybe the city manager can answer this, is especially for those years we took major hits in 20 and 21 because of the pandemic, isn't that specifically what ARPA dollars were designed to backfill? Is that kind of economic harm and hardship to the city? And has this been contemplated now that we have all this data in front of us by the commission as one of their ARPA priorities?
You are correct in that part of the American Rescue Plan funds were to be used or contemplated to be used for these kinds of impacts round. I can only say that the commission has pretty much allocated most, if not all, of those funds, but not every project is yet started or underway. They were just talking about one the other night where two competing vendors were interested in the amount of money set aside for the affordable housing component and stuff. And that discussion will continue to proceed, but you're correct, what it was set up for in some cases, but we're in a position where we have met the allocation requirements, at least initially. Again, not all projects have started or finished or maybe in process, but those funds, for the most part, have been, I don't know if the right word is not earmarked, but have been set aside for specific projects. This was not one of them that I think I can say accurately.
Yeah, I understand there's a plan in place that was adopted by the commission, but they still have through 2024 to allocate those dollars as final.
Yeah, but pretty much they've been allocated, just not spent yet.
Right. Gotcha.
Okay, Director Leclerc.
I'm a simple-minded person. What is your bottom line upfront recommendation for all of this information that we've seen? Based on everything that's happened and everything that we've seen, I mean, it's clear that the system has not generated enough revenue for whatever reason to pay its obligations, and the DDA has an agreement with the city that if the city/system can't pay its obligations, the DDA will contribute to help. So
You need a budget for $700,000 a year for the next couple of years. At least till the 5
it's not my recommendation. That is my conclusion based on what I have seen. I wouldn't tell you how to spend your money.
Bottom line front. Thank you. Director Van.
I'll just reiterate what Mr. Twain said. The contract, the way it's written, it does allow the city to just withhold the funds. So I don't know that our vote really matters all that much. And then on top of that, as the city manager mentioned, it could be the 2.8 or whatever it was, but the contract also allows for interest on payments that the city made for us to reimburse for the previous years. So it really could be even worse than that. all that being said, I think we should use this information that we've gotten today and still continue to discuss this in the parking committee, because just the allocation of $700,000 a year, we might be able to come up with something more creative to use that money to increase our revenues and decrease our expenses to the point where we're not having to make that contribution anymore. So I think that should be our focus as opposed to whether or not we pay the 1.5.
Yeah, I agree with Director Van Ness on that, and it just makes sense from everything that we've heard today. But I do like the idea of the taking 30 days, going back to committee regarding the $700,000 budget adjustment to discuss, to get a few more of these questions simply answered with the help of the finance department, and clear up a couple more things that we have. And then what the city does with the 1.5 is what they do. And Director Wallenberg.
Yeah, I just would add to that. I think it's, this board, from the 3 meetings that I've come to, I think, has demonstrated its willingness to be cooperative and recognize we're partners in this and stuff. I think it's just a value. I don't want there to be, if we take the 1.5 million, I think it is better said, one, that we've got more things to think about, that the committee can make some more recommendations to. But I'd really like to put to bed nicely without us taking the money back from the DDA. If there's just a simple consensus that, hey, we may have owed from the DDA side more, but if there's some way to demonstrate that folks are okay with the 1.5, knowing that it could have been worse. As you mentioned, we could have tried to put interest, but that's not the role. We're partners on both sides, no matter which hat we wear here. I think it's just a value to say that we understand that, and we're willing to at least now understand the city will take 1.5. There's a lot more discussion that needs to go on for budget adjustment and for other recommendations, and there'll be more information provided. As I said, we don't talk about pending litigation as to say that it's pending, but there may be some other issues associated with that we could provide updates for in the future as well.
Okay, then, okay, we've got a couple more comments.
Just one more thing. Is it possible, in advance of this, our next parking committee meeting, to get a breakdown of what the revenue or what the operating expenses consist of? I know there was a memo from the city commission included in our packet that's got very high level categories of expenditures for the system, but moving forward, for us to make good recommendations, I think it'd be important to have a really an idea of what makes up the 2.7 million or whatever.
Yeah, shouldn't be a problem.
Director Yazbek.
I'd also like to, I guess, 2 things. Did you see the letter from the state, the initial notice that started this whole thing, that said that the fund was at a $660,000 deficit?
The deficit elimination letter from the state, I did see that, yes.
How does that figure in, so I can just put my arms around it? How does that figure into the numbers that or reconcile with the numbers that we're talking about?
Not prepared to answer that, but what the state is measuring is strictly off of the balance sheet as of June 30, 2023. Actually, I don't know why it would be 600, because it's negative working capital. Thank you. I'll have to take another look at that because, they must be excluding the bonds payable within 1 year. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so they're excluding the current portion of the debt, which is a current liability, but for the state's purposes, they chose not to.
And then I would like for our next parking meeting to invite our handsome city attorney, because I think we should consider if it's as simple as $55,000 a month, I would like to explore stopping the payment of $55,000 a month. I mean, we're in court, just something like that. You know, my understanding is we're relying 100% on what MPS has represented or provided, information they've provided to come up with that number. So maybe we just stop paying that number until we can get a better understanding of what that really is. And maybe some other things. Maybe we flip the Washington back to the way it was and let them struggle over enforcing it or making their system, modifying their system to accommodate our wishes. So, I mean, just a couple of things that I think it'd be important in the context of this nightmare of the parking system being so deficient.
I think those are all things we can discuss at the committee level for sure. And I do think it would be helpful if we could have somebody from finance at that meeting.
Yeah, no, staff will be available once you set this up. There's a lot, again, information that can be provided. You hit it on the head. There's more stuff that you need to know with respect to going forward and how we're going to fix that than just simply, you know, allowing us to make, as part of any update we have to do to Treasury for this year, because, you know, that could have been an issue too. Once we know our final numbers for this year, it is not pleasant to have to deal with Treasury, and certainly from an administrative standpoint, I don't really like two things: deficit elimination plans and taking money from fund balance, except for special type projects, single type projects and things. So.
And I think I started out by saying that the question is not whether we're going to help. I mean, we approach things as a team. But in that spirit, let's as a team see how we can attack the underlying issue and how the DDA can be involved in that maybe a little bit more so we can help going forward.
Okay, Mr. Wollenweber, it sounds like you're looking for some action.
I would just like an indication, if that would be okay from the committee, that they understand that there was and maybe the minutes could just say that, but that they understand that finance staff will make the appropriate transfers based on notices from our DDA director for the 1.5 million, and understand that we will be available and as early as possible or as necessary to engage in further discussions on this as to future obligations, ways to fix, and things like that.
Motion and ditto.
Thank you. I can second that, I think.
Okay, in the form of a motion, there you go. Director Leclave has brought a motion on the table, and Director Wollenweber has seconded it. Any discussion from any of the board members? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We appreciate your time.
I would just say, one, thanks to their staff for doing this, but two, as if it is desirable, I'm sure we can twist their arm to be available for one of our subcommittee meetings along with other members of staff, so that there's a better, clear understanding of this. But thank you each.
Okay, thank you.
Could we get the MPS numbers for 24 to date?
I don't think do we have any of those yet?
We're close. There'll be a reconciliation meeting with MPS, myself and Deputy Chief Spencer tomorrow.
Good.
To get the final invoice from them subsequent to that.
Yeah, Tim and I have made a note of some of the suggestions for that subcommittee meeting, so we'll try to get that to you as soon as possible.
Okay. Are you okay, Mr. Twing?
I'm good.
You're good? I just want to make sure on that item, you got everything you need. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Did you get your glasses back?
Okay, let's move on then. Item 5B, Royal Oak Live 2024 45-day review.
Just
Daniel,
under the contract,
go ahead.
With the chamber, Shelley Kemp is here to give you the 45-day overview of Royal Oak Live.
Did you want to address the board, Shelley?
Hi, everybody. Shelley Kemp. I am the president of the Royal Oak Chamber. Hi. Yeah, so as per the contract, I'm here just to, one, thank you. We had a great show. According to me and everybody else that watched, there were considerably more people than there were last year. I know sometimes I think Placer AI might say different. I would argue with them. But anyway, it was a great event. I know that one of our downtown businesses, I was talking to Katie from Give Thanks Bakery, just out of we were talking in a Leprechauns game, and she said how amazing the event was and how much she loved it. So I think you guys might have gotten that email. But yeah, we had another international lineup and national lineup. Alexander Zonchek, who is our musical director, did another bang-up job this year, and we're looking forward to next year. And yeah, we had good press. We hired a PR person this year as opposed to kind of halfway doing it ourselves and looking at social media to help us. We did hire a professional. We definitely got some more coverage on local TV stations. And yeah, so I'm kind of here to answer questions more than anything, because everything I want to say is in the 45-day wrap-up along with our expenses.
Any questions for Ms. Count?
I just want to say the hardest part of that previous conversation that we just had was seeing you in the audience and being able to talk to you next. So that was my
Yeah, that you had to
frustration.
stay for.
Sorry.
No,
I warned her
really,
in advance.
No, it was actually,
Yeah.
I'm glad I was here to hear it, so no problem.
Yeah. Okay, no, I participated in this event. I mean, I came down, I thought it was a great event. I very much enjoyed it.
And I will say, I mean, yes, we do summer concert series, and that is very Royal Oak centric. And I know families and neighborhoods all, kind of text each other, and they're all going to show up every Thursday for 6 weeks. The crowd for Royal Oak Live is the most respectful, funny. I mean, and so I cannot tell you how spotless the park was when that event was over. It was mind-blowing that there was literally, the only garbage was what was overflowing in the other receptacles. Everybody was so happy to be there that I weirdly get emotional during that event. I kind of go up on the hill and I look at everybody just enjoying the music, and I get a little teary-eyed like a weirdo, but it was really good. So it's not weird, but just thank you again for supporting it. We truly appreciate it.
Okay. Did you need anything else, Mr. Twing?
No, you've got an agreement with the chamber for this event through next year.
Right.
Over here.
So everything's all set.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, you guys. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a great night.
Okay. Sign grant application, Clear 2 mortgage.
Yes.
Daniel.
Before you is a facade grant application that is just for a sign. Clear 2 Mortgage is located at 219 South Main Street. As you can see going in there, the sign does qualify for the facade grant. The applicant was not able to make it today. This application did not go before infrastructure due to some shuffling around the holiday and the meeting occurring right after that. And so the board could choose to throw this back to committee, or you could choose to move forward.
Motion to approve. Yeah, I'm going to second his motion to
Okay.
approve. No need to send it back,
Okay.
just because they couldn't come today and hold up for another month and stuff, so.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Request for DDA dollars, Arts, Beats and Eats Fashion Show 2024. Who's handling this?
So this is a request that came from Director LeClave, who has worked with the Arts, Beats, and Eats folks. This is something that was birthed last year. Part of this is they get volunteer models, and essentially this is to compensate the models for their time. I'll yield to Director LeClave to explain further.
So he pretty much covered most of it. Now, unfortunately, actually, we did get some bad news that one of the what is it, Aveda, they would allow the models and us to prepare for the show, and they actually backed out this year. So there is still a contract with a group called Channel Iris and Arts, Beats and Eats to try and see if we can salvage the fashion show. But it may not happen. Still, they would like to continue to potentially do this next year and the year before or the year after, just to make this a thing, because it's incorporating downtown retail fashion, or retail stores into Arts, Beats and Eats, and it was a really good show last year. So ideally, we can keep this going. It may not happen this year. We still like to be prepared for it since it's already downtown dollars funds, that it's not already allocated. If I'm not correct, or if I'm correct.
Most of those funds are not allocated.
They're not allocated?
Correct.
Okay. But yeah, so at least we have the funds for the event.
Director Yazbek.
I thought it was a great component of Arts, Beats and Eats last year. Director LeClave brought incredible energy to the whole presentation, and I'll make a motion to approve this. I mean, there's so many salons in the town, there's got to be somebody that...
We're hoping Salon 6, maybe, somebody, but this is a lot of it's on Arts, Beats and Eats, but this just at least covers the models, and this money just goes right back to downtown businesses anyway, so.
Some very nice and generous bar owner has also agreed to allow the models to practice in his establishment, so that's all taken care of also. We're not going to back out.
All right.
So yeah, I make a motion to approve this.
I'll support Director Yazbek's motion.
I have a motion and a second on the table. Discussion? So, Mr. Twing, we would just sign an agreement with them, and then if it doesn't take place, it doesn't take place, and the dollars are
You're
not...
just allocating the money at this point. If it doesn't happen, then there's no payments out.
Okay.
Additionally, last year what I did is, this is during the same time that we issue those giveaway cards during Arts, Beats and Eats, and so as part of those batches during Labor Day weekend, they go out with that.
Good. Okay. Anything else from the board? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes. Draft Master Plan, Downtown Core Activity Center. Mr. Twing?
Yes. Nope. I wanted to make you aware that the Planning Commission is reviewing the draft master plan for the city. This portion of the draft master plan is relation to the downtown area. It does have some goals, objectives in it that I wanted to make sure you were aware of and give you an opportunity to have input on as a board. The Planning Commission is having some review meetings, the first one being August 19th. Two more are scheduled for September 16th and 17th if needed. Once you've had enough time to look at it, if there's a specific recommendation or ideas the board wants to adopt or pass along, you can either do that at the next meeting or any meeting between now and probably before the 17th, so that we make sure the Planning Commission gets your input. So I don't need any action today. This was the first meeting where I could get it in front of the board and let you have a review of it. It does contain some recommendations in terms of doing a downtown master plan, study and reducing Main Street. It has some things in it that I think as a board you may want to have input on going forward. But again, I don't need anything today.
Director London.
Things that are crossed off in red, does that mean it's no longer being considered? Oh, the strike throughs.
Say that again?
Well, there's a lot of things that are striking
Yeah.
in red, does that mean it's no longer being considered?
Well, the stuff that's stricken in red isn't part of the downtown.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay, so it's another part of the city.
I understand.
So I didn't want to confuse it with what is being referenced for the downtown.
So I encourage everybody to take a look at this. I did notice a couple items that are in it that, let's just say I would question. So our comments would go to the planning commission if we had comments?
That's correct.
Okay, and if we were to agree as a board, we'd have to do that by next month's meeting in order, is that enough time frame wise?
Well, effectively, I guess, I don't want to give the indication. The planning commission is reviewing the draft document. They're going to, at the end of, when they're comfortable with a draft document, it's going to have to go up to the city commission. The city commission is going to have to concur with the draft plan and then release it for distribution. And the distribution has to be a minimum of 60 days. They have to hold the planning commission has to hold a public hearing after that 60 days, and then you start the adoption process. So I don't want to give you the perception you have to make a motion as a board at the August meeting.
Right.
It's, if you have some concerns with it before, the planning commission sends it to the city commission, it'd be good to have them.
Okay, so I don't know, Director Yazbek, go
Yeah,
ahead.
can we send this back to the committees, the two committees to meet this month and maybe articulate any concerns they might have, and then as a board, we can consider it next month?
It might be the easiest way to do it is to refer it back to both committees to take a look at, as opposed to us forming a new committee and trying to go through it. But there is some things in there regarding parking that I think this board should look at, and usage of some building usages and things like that, so I think it's worth to take a look at. Okay. The last item is the siren communication and impact report. We all got that. Did you, anything, Daniel?
This is informational only. This is their closeout from the last fiscal year, just so
Right.
you're aware of the total that you paid for in the last 12 months.
Okay. Anything, Mr. Twing? Daniel, anything else?
Nothing else?
Board members, anything you want to bring to the table? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, can you give us an update on where WROK is and their response to our on-site meeting that took place many months ago at this point? Because it was spring. We haven't seen their revised plan.
What's that? Hill Street?
Yes.
I haven't seen one yet. We're sending the comments on.
Well, it was months ago that we met with them.
I thought that we discussed that at the July meeting, or perhaps the June meeting, because we discussed the ideas that were discussed at the site visit, and they talked about the integration of a boardwalk idea.
You brought the boardwalk back. You had some comments on that at the committee level. I'm not sure you were at that meeting.
Okay.
I can double check.
Was it distributed?
I want to say it was July's.
There was.
Most of the time, the committee stuff's not distributed.
Right, okay.
So usually it's done at the meeting.
All right. Maybe Daniel, you
They might have something, yeah, they probably do, but we don't usually distribute the material for the committees.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion by Director Leclave. Second by Director Keith. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes, and we are adjourned.